but there remained a hole at the center of Western civilization, a meaning-shaped hole. That hole has grown larger and larger in the decades since, a cancer eating away at our heart. We tried to fill it with the will to action. We tried to fill it with science. We tried to fill it with world-changing political activism. None of it provides the meaning we seek. The Right Side of History by Ben Shapiro. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Cody P, and this is the Author Authority, where I'm helping you reach your authenticity. In today's video, I've got a bit of a doozy. This is, in fact, a history book. Who would have thought? I didn't realize that getting into this myself. I've been watching Ben Shapiro's podcast for 6-8 months now, like not super frequently, but once a week, twice a week, I will definitely catch up on what he has to say. And I can follow the podcast really well because it's a lot of recent events and things that I'm very passionate about that are very current in my life. The Right Side of History, however, is a chronological breakdown. From what I'm noticing, I'm actually on the last chapter right now, but I had to get this video out. What I'm noticing is that it's a chronological breakdown of human reason and the necessity of religion over time and how they've kind of battled each other. So we've had many, many different philosophies, and Ben Shapiro outlines all of them. There's probably more, but he outlines any of significance that there's ever been a militia behind. And I would say that this is a very lean book. Look at it. It's not huge, but it is very, very dense. And because I'm not super well versed on a lot of the history that he's talking about and a lot of the names that he's saying, a lot of it isn't sticking. I've been listening to the audio version, which he narrates fantastically. Ben Shapiro is a top-rate speaker, one of the finest in the world, but even still, I can't seem to focus on it. I think if I knew the history a little bit better, I would probably enjoy this book more, but I think a second read-through will provide the context that I need. I've just been listening to it on 1.5 times speed, and Ben Shapiro speaks very quickly already. There are two counterparts to this book, and this one lies somewhere in the middle but stands of its own accord. So on one hand, you've got 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Love that book. Hands down, in my opinion, the Peterson book is better. It's more engaging, although it's very dense. I would consider the imagery to be richer and more inspiring than Ben Shapiro's very, very lean The Right Side of History. And then on the other side here of Ben Shapiro, I would put Ayn Rand, actually. I would put Atlas Shrugged in specific, and it's because in Atlas Shrugged you can watch the country grow into a communistic collective life and watch it tear itself down from the inside out. It puts you in the first person of watching somebody submit the self into the collective we. And Ben Shapiro argues against that. And not only that, he's criticized Ayn Rand as an author for being objectively motivated. Like, she's definitely preaching her agenda, although she lived it. She was from Soviet Russia, and I still love the book. So I love 12 Rules for Life, and honestly, I like Atlas Shrugged a lot more, even though both of those books are a lot bigger to chew on than The Right Side of History. So that book, The Right Side of History, is between these two, but it's very lean. Like, Ben Shapiro sprints to the finish line from the beginning of where human reason was born, kind of with the Greeks and things like that. He really likes the Greeks and the founding fathers and their belief in moral gods and their undying reason and morality. And it's how, in fact, the front catchline of the book is how reason and moral purpose made the West great. So it's been a bit of an educational ride for me. I didn't know a lot of these things. Like, I didn't realize that the French Revolution was, in fact, the government and its civilians at war with one another. Not even a civil war like America had, where you had people who on the North wanted the freedom of slaves, and on the South wanted to retain slavery. So it was just the country divided. The French Revolution was straight up the government versus its people, and the government was on the side of the collective. Well, then the people also had to be on the side of the collective. Neither of them had a god to unite them, and so they murdered each other mercilessly. He outlines the entire fall of Christianity, but also its birth and how it was part the teaching of the Greeks, as well as some of the other learnings that we'd had over time. And then the founding fathers came. There was Catholicism versus Lutheranism, and watching the religion itself become divided against each other, and Christianity fighting itself and taking itself out. And then we have an Enlightenment age where humans think that we're finding ourselves to be the center of our own moralities. And there is a philosophy, and I don't even remember who said it. I'll put it in text here, but it was essentially the very same morals as a religion. Like, we need to use reason in order to find why we should be the best for mankind, because virtue has the highest returns. Virtue is the best way to live. The fewest people get hurt. The more prosperous we become, the more virtuous we are. And he said, predicated on wise decisions of who? He said, as long as we make wise decisions of virtue, we'll prosper and take care of each other's man. But where does that virtue come from? Who gets to decide what that virtue is? Boom, the collective. And every time the collective comes together, it starts eating itself. And then even Vladimir Putin has said that Stalin was just misunderstood, and it's our way of attacking him, even though some 50, 60 million people died, or several million people died under his rule. And then that moved into Maoist China, where definitely 50 to 60 million intellectual people starved and were murdered. And this is all the act of collectivism. And this is what we've seen before in history. And we're seeing it form again, is where the book has begun concluding in all-inclusive politics, where we can't have a discussion about that because you're alienating my rights. Well, that's taking away freedom of speech, and not just freedom of speech, but the amount of people who get rights. They're in a hierarchy themselves. They've created their own hierarchy. So you get a woman who's here, and then a black woman would be higher on the scale of inclusivity, right? But because of that, it would be lower on the scale of the free market somehow. So they're damning themselves this way. But then, how many times can you divide that? And there's a Peterson video that really, really nails this. I feel like I'm going to butcher it, but there's always somebody who has it worse off than you. And because they have it worse off than you, they should be given more. So if they can't work, let's give them more. And if they can't earn, let's give them more. Oh, another example from history that I remember was Margaret Sanger. And this is something I'm going to have to look into, because Planned Parenthood has saved my ass multiple times. But apparently, in 1921, she was quoted as saying that the most pressing issue in American times is the sterilization of, this is a paraphrase, of the disabled and unable to work. A paraphrase of that. So she literally wanted in the womb to kill handicapped babies. And this is the founder of Planned Parenthood. And that's kind of what it was based on all those years ago. And Ben Shapiro outlines the rise of collectivism and the fall of religion all at the same time. And so when Margaret Sanger was saying things like this, and that the greater good was for the collective, well, then Hitler was also being indoctrinated into the rise of a German state. So the Germans believed that they were the finest people, that they were the most divine. And then they contrasted themselves against Jews, calling them vermin, saying that even if they were converted out of Judaism, that they would still be worthless and they would still be scum of the earth. And so Hitler was a proud proponent of that. And he lived that to its extent, to the point that collectivism again ruled, and people worshipped the Führer, and because there was no greater calling than mankind itself, they chose him, obviously an extremely evil figure. So that was collectivism, Nazi Germany. You had Stalin and Mussolini in World War II, and then all of these collectivist states coming together and then fighting about it and hating each other, and then World War II. And ultimately the West, America, we ended up like winning, and that's when we became very prosperous. And in the 1950s, most people had gone to church within a 7-day period. And even though women had less rights at that point in time and blacks were still segregated, Martin Luther King quoted the Bible in order to fight slavery, or not necessarily slavery, but to fight that inequality. He was constantly quoting the Bible more than any other source. And so was the other side, and that's kind of how he was able to break through. So there's a common morality, and ultimately that's Ben Shapiro's argument here, is that the reason we're so divided in politics nowadays is because we don't have the same end goal at all. Like, there's no unifying force between the two parties, and so we hate each other, like both sides, just back and forth constantly. Whereas if there was a steady moral virtue that always pointed north, then the two sides could haggle out over which argument was the best way to achieve that common highest goal. And the difference between that and collectivism is that collectivism puts the highest goal in mankind's own hands. So, we decide what's virtuous, and then we always end up murdering and killing each other en masse. Genocide. But if you put it in, that doesn't mean that wars haven't been caused by religion as well, but if you put it in the hands of a god, it's not in our hands. There is only that ultimate morality at the very, very top to strive towards. So, boom. I think that's about it. I don't want to ramble on for too long here. It's a good book, but you're going to want to already have some primer in history. I think this is an excellent primer in history, but the book is almost a little bit too lean. I would say go for 12 Rules for Life or go for Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, even though those books are longer and potentially even harder to read. But this book is excellent in addition to those two, and I think when I'm not in such a rush, if I take some time to sit down and really read the book and digest it, I could take a lot more from it. But he's done an excellent job of backing up his every argument that he bases can be traced back to this book, and I think it's an excellent primer in how to fight collectivism. And anytime that you're compelled to speak a certain way, or if mankind is trying to build its own virtue and then eating itself, these are all the arguments against it. So, I don't know. I'm still on the last chapter. I don't know how it concludes. You're just going to have to read it yourself. I do have links down below. I'm an affiliate from Amazon, although I got this one at my local Barnes & Noble. If you do buy from my link, I get a little kickback at no extra cost to you, so I appreciate that so much. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more of the latest book reviews here on the Author Authority. My name is Cody P. Don't forget to hit that bell notification button, and you can find me on Instagram. I'll drop links below. Thanks so much for watching. Drop a request down below. Question of the day: what book should I read next? Boom, we're out.